Hello and a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters, coming up in the programme. Sparking outrage from human rights groups, Iran executes opposition journalist Ruhollah Zam, whose online activism helped spark mass protests 3 years ago. We meet Nadine Ashraf, the 22-year-old Egyptian feminist determined to break the country's long-standing taboo about sexual harassment and assault. And we also head to Baghdad, where a new generation of sports fans, male and female, is slowly transforming the face of the war-scarred city. Iran has executed opposition journalist Ruhollah Zam. Earlier this year, Zam was sentenced to death after his online activism helped inspire national anti-government protests back in 2017. He used a number of digital platforms to share logistical information about demonstrations and also to publish embarrassing information about Iranian officials. His execution has sparked outrage worldwide.
Executed for speaking out against the Iranian government. Journalist and dissident Ruhollah Zam was tried and convicted of corruption on earth, one of the country's most serious offenses. Iranian officials considered Zam a key figure in coordinating the 2017 anti-government protests over the economy. He ran the website Ahmad News on the popular messaging app Telegram, where he also shared the timing and locations of various protests and videos to his 1 million followers. The Iranian government accused Zam of inciting violence and being a spy supported by the U.S. and Israeli secret services. He fled Iran and was given asylum in France, but Iran's Revolutionary Guards managed to lure him to Iraq, where he was arrested last year. The government shared a filmed confession that rights group Amnesty International says was coerced. France and human rights groups have condemned his execution, with Reporters Without Borders tweeting, "RSF is outraged at this new crime of Iranian justice." Even being the son of reformist cleric Mohammed Ali Zam was not enough to save his life. According to Amnesty International, Iran has executed at least 251 people last year, second only to China.
A look now at some of the most interesting stories to emerge this past week, including the decision by Italian writer Corrado Augias to hand back his Legion of Honor award in protest at France bestowing that same honor on the Egyptian president. While in Lebanon, a judge has charged the country's prime minister for his role in August's deadly Beirut port explosion. And in another big story, Morocco has become the latest Arab country to normalise ties with Israel.
It's the latest Arab nation to normalize relations with Israel in recent months. In doing so, Morocco joins the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan.
I think that this is the foundation on which we can now build this peace. We'll resume liaison offices quickly between Israel and Morocco and work as rapidly as possible to establish full diplomatic relations.
In Casablanca, the Jewish community is welcoming the move, saying it will highlight a little-known part of the country's history.
I think there is indeed going to be a positive impact for everyone. We have been here in Morocco in its culture for thousands of years, so we have a lot of history here.
On the diplomatic level, the situation is more complex. Rabat signed on to the agreement in large part to the United States recognizing Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara, a former Spanish colony that has demanded its independence for several years. In Lebanon, a judge has charged the country's caretaker prime minister, Hassan Diab, and 3 former ministers with negligence in connection with an explosion that rocked Beirut's port back in August. His designated successor, Saad Hariri, denounced what he called an unconstitutional decision.
I have come to the presidency of the Council of Ministers to express my total rejection of a violation of the Constitution that the judge committed in indicting the Prime Minister. Our laws are very clear. The head of government can only be tried before a special court decided by Parliament.
But human rights advocates say the charges are justified.
Ministers can be prosecuted by the courts because they have no immunity like the president or like parliamentarians. It is therefore a completely legal procedure.
2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at the port triggered the blast, which killed 200 and injured some 6,500 people. Italian writer Corrado Aguias returned a prize in protest. He refused the Legion of Honor from the French government after Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was given the same award during a visit in Paris last week. The 85-year-old called it a political and moral error, saying Sisi is to blame for acts of torture carried out by the Egyptian regime.
Sisi is objectively complicit as head of state in the criminal behavior committed by his subordinates.
In 2016, Italian student Giulio Regeni was found dead in Egypt with indications he had been tortured. Since the killing, Rome has accused Cairo of not cooperating with the investigation to track down suspects in the Egyptian army. Aguias says he wanted to pay tribute to the student's memory and express what he called European values in support of human rights.
The Egyptian women's rights movement has a new poster girl in the form of a 22-year-old philosophy student with a smartphone. Nadine Ashraf has been named one of the BBC's 100 Women of the Year, applauded for her work to expose sexual harassment and her campaigning to tackle gender-based violence. Much of her work takes place in the digital realm. Olivia Salazar-Winspear tells us more.
A safe space to tackle sexual harassment and gender-based violence in Egypt. This is the woman behind it.
أنا نادين أشرف وأنا اللي بدأت أكاونت Assault Police.
Within a week of creating her blog, Nadine was inundated with first-person accounts of the everyday ordeals suffered by women in Egypt. The university students now being applauded for fueling the country's fledgling Me Too movement.
I wanted to express myself and have my voice heard by the people. I wanted to expose someone I knew had committed the crime of sexual harassment. But no one was talking about it, as everyone believes it's shameful to talk about this, and we shouldn't do that in an Arab society.
Earlier this year, Nadine revealed multiple incidents of sexual assault committed by a wealthy young man. He's currently on trial. A gang rape, which took place at the Fairmont Nile City Hotel in 2014, was also flagged up on the platform. The victim was 18 years old at the time and decided to speak out this summer. Yet prosecutors arrested a handful of witnesses for violating morality laws and not the attackers. Cases that have rallied support for Nadine's cause and saw Egyptian lawmakers passing a bill to better protect victims' identities this year. Yet the young campaigner believes a wider culture of sexism is holding back further progress in the fight against sexual harassment.
The problem is bigger than one person, one crime, one incident. It's even bigger than 10 incidents. The problem is about the way we look at women. We never take crimes against women seriously.
Alongside her studies, Nadine's now working on programs to end gender-based violence in Egypt and the Arab world, focusing on issues like child marriage and conjugal rape in a country where 99% of women say they've experienced harassment of one sort or another.
The Iraqi capital may not be known as a hub of sporting excellence, but that could be about to change. Emerging from the chaos of war is a new generation keen to have fun and embrace new challenges. But it's not always plain sailing, as our reporters in Baghdad, Lucile Wassermann and Jack Hewson, discover.
A windsurfing club in the heart of Baghdad. For young Iraqis with limited opportunities for fun, it's a breath of fresh air.
It's really an amazing sport. It allows me to spend time with my friends and my coach. I meet new people and broaden my horizons. It's great.
In the recent past, it's hard to imagine these scenes in Baghdad. At the end of the 2000s, this part of the city was one of the most dangerous in Iraq. Mohammed lost his father around that time. Now he hopes for a better future for the country.
Before there was a civil war, so it was impossible. And today it's different. It's less dangerous. We can practice and train. And honestly, I've totally fallen in love with the sport since I started.
About 60 Iraqis are now enrolled in this club. Ahmed, the coach, plans to take them to Egypt for more extensive training. The lack of funding and resources is a major challenge for those who want to become professional athletes.
With our budget, we can't afford new equipment. It costs way too much. So we can be competitive, but we know that we can't compete at a high level.
Athletes always face challenges, but in Iraq they are particularly numerous for women. At this female rugby club in the capital, the first of its kind, these young women are training for their first ever regional tournament. Their captain explains that they do so despite negative comments and criticisms.
It started from the beginning, when we created the team. We were training in a sports school, and the first criticisms came from the students themselves. Even today, many men, but also women, criticize us on social networks when they see pictures of us.
Many of these players come here without the approval of their families. As vice president of the Iraqi Rugby Federation, Farouk fights to destigmatize women's sport.
Some players would have the potential to be among the best in the region, at least in the Arab world, but they face enormous problems because their families do not allow them to play the sport.
There is still a long way to go, but for these young Iraqis, new sports are a sign of progress and even a tool to challenge prejudice.
Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Middle East Matters. Don't forget you can watch this show again and others on our website, france24.com. Thank you very much for watching and see you again next week.
Residents from France's disadvantaged suburbs tell their own stories and take the viewers beyond the usual clichés about the French banlieue.
Sur le plan humain, c'est une expérience de fou en fait.
Les habitants valent beaucoup mieux que ce qu'on en dit.
Tu rends fier ta ville, les gens qui, quand ils me voient dans la rue, me disent je suis fier de toi, je t'ai vu passer à la télé, c'est bien comment t'as parlé, tu nous as bien représentés.
Watch their daily reality in the Banlieue Project on France 24 and France24.com.